analysis review of the Barcroft Department's Master Financing and Development Plan, or MFDP. We look forward to working with you and working with designated stakeholders over the next several months to review Jair Lynch's vision for Barcroft in the context of existing county policies and plans. Before we begin tonight's meeting, I need to cover some logistics. We are holding a virtual public meeting today, and all participants with us are joining remotely. And thank you, Matt, for starting the recording and orienting people to the virtual environment and cover a few specifics about how today's meeting will run. It's available to join from the Barcroft Department's Land Use Analysis webpage and the county's events calendar. Additionally, there's a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. If anyone loses internet connectivity during today's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. Please keep your video turned off and microphone muted until you're called upon. Excuse me. And turn off sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. These tools are located on your command bar in Teams. If you do not see this toolbar, the command bar, try tapping or clicking on the center of your screen and it should pop up. When called upon to speak, you must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that's located on your command bar. The moderator does not have the ability to unmute you, and if you're dialing in by phone, press *6 to unmute. When you're finished speaking, please remute your telephone. The meeting chat is active for participants who need technical assistance only. The meeting chat should not be used for discussion or public comment, for questions about agenda items or questions about information. 1 second. All comments must be shared verbally for the record. A few additional notes for designated Barcroft Working Group members. Tonight's conversation will be limited to members of the Barcroft Working Group roster. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to do a kickoff, an informational session, and then collect initial questions and feedback from the Barcroft Working Group. We are going to endeavor to have options for public comment in future meetings. And if you are here to provide public comment, I would invite you to return at a future meeting or to send an email to Mr. Matuzik, to Ms. Sontag, to Mr. Berkey, my co-chair, or myself. And perhaps someone can get the emails in the chat for that, but I believe that they'll also come up over the course of the PowerPoint presentation. If members wish to be recognized to speak on an item, please use the raise hand function. Turn your video on and leave your microphone muted. And I will use the raised hand and video feeds that are on as an indicator of who would like to speak. Once you've been recognized, you may unmute. And once you've completed speaking, please turn your video feed and microphone back off. I will take this opportunity to say that it is my preference that we hold questions until the end of the presentation. That is how that's how I'd like to do things tonight, and I hope that that's not too much of an inconvenience. Do we have any members? I believe the answer is no, but do we have any members of the Barcroft Working Group? No, excuse me, we might have one who are joined by phone. I think I see one phone number. So if you are able, if you're on by phone, and if you're able, can you please press *6 to let me know who you are?
Oh, this is Juliana Levine from Arlington View.
Thank you very much. All right. I would like orange, please. Thank you. Today's meeting and future Barcroft Working Group meetings will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information is associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. And let me go back, Julie. I will try to verbally check on you to see if you wish to be recognized, since you don't have a video feed option. But I will also ask, are you able to see your email right now by any chance? Assuming the answer is yes, I'm going to ask Mr. Matuzik or Ms. Sontag to send my cell phone number to you by email, so that you can send me a text message if I am not able to reach you, or if I forget to get your to check in on you, or if you have a more pressing question. Again, today's meeting and future meetings are recorded and posted. All information associated with the meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. County staff have prepared a presentation. I'll get to that in a moment, or I'll defer to them in a moment. For the record, I realize I skipped this. My name is Daniel Weir. I am with Mr. Berkey, co-chair of this process. I am representing the Planning Commission, and I'm in the chair of the Form-Based Code Area Working Group, as well as the Planning Commission's representative to that group. So I think what I want to do is I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Berkey, and then Mr. Matuzik and Ms. Sontag, and then we'll try to do popcorn, and hopefully we'll get through everyone in a reasonably orderly manner.
Thanks, Daniel. As Daniel said, my name is Eric Berkey. I think a good number of folks, we'll get to meet over the next few months. So I'm excited to get to know folks, maybe here or offline. So Eric Berkey, I'm going to be co-chairing this effort with Daniel. So I think he'll be chairing some of these meetings. I'll chair some. We'll tag on and share the load. I'm also representing the Planning Commission. Before that, I was the chair of the Housing Commission for several years, and I am the immediate past president of the Douglas Park Civic Association, in which Barcroft Apartments sit. So Daniel and I are both Pike residents as well, and so are familiar with the area. With that, I think I'll turn it over to Matt Matuzik with county staff, so folks can introduce themselves, and then I think we'll go to the rest of the working group.
Thank you, Eric. Those of you that aren't familiar with me, Matt Matuzik, I work in the planning division in Arlington County, focusing a lot of the development corridors, and really just kind of helping a hand in some of the work that's happening on Columbia Pike, as well as other corridors like Crystal City and Pentagon City. But here, just kind of making sure that we can effectively conduct a very succinct process and make sure that we get some of the best feedback we can get in a limited amount of time. And along with me is Olivia Sontag, who is also the other co-lead. Let her introduce herself.
Hi.
Ms. Sontag, I'll cut you off just to apologize to Ms. Danowski, who I know is also here. I did not mean to omit you, but Olivia, back to you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm Olivia Sontag, also with the Arlington County Planning Division. I'm the Columbia Pike Initiative coordinator, so working with Matt on this Barcroft land use analysis effort. And I'll pass it off to Melissa.
Thank you. So Melissa Danowski, I'm in the Housing Division, and I'm the overall Barcroft coordinator for the county. So Matt Matuzik and Olivia Sontag are leading the this planning phase, this land use phase, and I am more of the overall Barcroft County coordinator. And I'll hand it to Erica Moore.
Hi, I'm Erica Moore. I'm the Communications and Engagement Manager for CPHD, the Department of Community Planning, Housing and Development, and I and my team are leading the engagement effort around this land use analysis that will be starting soon. Daniel, I don't know if we want to just start going through members.
You know what? Maybe we just start with I'll go through the list, and I'll call on people by role, and you can sign up and you can say who you are. So the first tranche of people are the 10 civic associations from Columbia Pike. I'll invite you to just chime in as you're able to, and hopefully we don't have everyone speaking up at once, so I don't have to start gaveling people in and out.
I'll go first. Mark Cole, Culver Heights.
Thank you, Mark.
I'm Michelle Thought from Penrose.
Thank you, Michelle.
Kathy Guernsey from Columbia Forest.
Thank you, Kathy. Do we have Arlington Heights, Arlington Mill, Arlington View? I know Barcroft, Columbia Heights, Douglas Park, or Foxcroft Heights.
Linda Guy from Douglas Park.
Thank you, Linda.
This is Juliana Levine from Arlington View.
Thank you again, Julia. All right. Hopefully the rest of the civic associations will be able to join us in future meetings. Columbia Pike Partnership.
Hi. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, John. And Amy
Hi,
and Andrew. Okay. Go ahead, John.
I'm John Snyder on the Columbia Pike Partnership Board.
Hi, I'm Amy McWilliams, Deputy Director for the Columbia Pike Partnership.
And I'm Andrew Schneider, the new Executive Director of the Columbia Pike Partnership. And my camera is still part of another meeting that I can't get out of.
It's I know at least one person here tonight is quadruple booked, so thank you to all of you who are doing double duty right now. I will pick on the Columbia Pike Partnership because you're first, but I want to remind where we've got more than one person on the meeting from a group that there is one person who's going to be the designated speaker, and this doesn't count, but the first person to speak from a group is the person that we're going to give the floor to for the rest of the meeting, rather than go back and forth. So from the Planning Commission, you've heard from Eric and I. Transportation.
Good evening, I'm Chris Slatt, representing the Transportation Commission, and don't be surprised at future meetings if you see my vice chair and alternate, Aiden Muradovic, representing TC as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Slatt. Parks and Rec.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nelson Dimter, and I'm here from the Parks and Rec Commission.
Thank you. Housing. And HALB, you're on deck.
Hi, excuse me, Joan Lawrence from the HLRB, and I will be joined by Dick Woodruff. We're both former chairs of the HLRB, and I also spent some time working on the Columbia Pike Form-Based Code some decades ago, I think, as well as being on the housing study. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Lawrence. Same reminder to you as with the CPP, but again, this is introductions, so I'm not holding y'all's feet to the fire yet. Forestry and Natural Resources on deck as pedestrian and bicycle advisory committees.
Yeah, David Howell, Forestry and Natural Resources. Occasionally, Carolyn Haynes may be present in future meetings as my alternate.
Thank you, Commissioner Howell. Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory, followed by Disabilities Advisory.
Yeah, Mike Hanna, I'm the BAC, and I think the PAC rep as well. I'll be doing both, double-hatted.
Thank you, Mr. Hanna. Disabilities Advisory Commission, followed by Barcroft Residents Council.
Hi, this is Karen Odont from the Disability Advisory Commission, and when I'm not able to attend, Doris Ray will represent the commission. Thanks.
Thank you. Barcroft Residents Council, followed by Arlington Community Foundation.
I don't believe Ruben is here tonight, Daniel.
Okay. We will have to make sure to find an opportunity to run the presentation by Ruben as soon as we're able to.
Yeah, we'll reach out.
Arlington Community Foundation, followed by AHS and NVAHA.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Marroquin. I'm the Director of Grants and Initiatives at the Arlington Community Foundation, and I may be joined, or excuse me, I may have an alternate in the future, Michelle Winters. So thank you.
Thank you. AHS and NVAHA, followed by Voice. AHS and the AHA. Well, I guess go into voice, followed by NAACP.
Good evening, everybody. Wells Harrell with NAACP. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Wells. Mr. Harrell, Bugata. We'll have to also reach out to Saul, I guess.
Yes,
right.
we will.
Okay. Ideally, it would be nice if we could get Eric and I on those calls too, but I guess we could figure that out offline. I think Ms. Moore, but we'll be in touch. All right. With that, again, as I mentioned, we have the staff have prepared a presentation to help orient everyone to the site and previous actions leading to the Master Financing and Development Plan proposal. And I will pass it off to Melissa Danowski to kick that off. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So again, Melissa Danowski with the Housing Division and the overall Barcroft Coordinator. So before handing this back to Matt Matusik, I'd like to start with a brief overview of some background information and project priorities, which will help inform our work as we move forward. Next slide. So first, as a reminder, in the fall of 2021, Arlington County learned that Barcroft Apartments was for sale. At the time, Barcroft property was the largest market rate affordable apartment community in Arlington, or MARC. The sale process was highly competitive and the sale listing received a lot of interest. Fortunately, instead of being purchased by a developer interested only in market rate development, Arlington County was able to provide a $150 million loan, and the Amazon Housing Equity Fund provided a approximately $160 million loan to assist with the acquisition of Barcroft Apartments by Gyre Lynch Real Estate Partners. So as a result of the acquisition, all 1,335 units were committed to 99 years of affordability up to 60% area median income, and no resident was displaced as a result of the acquisition. Next slide.
Before I transition, and if we could pause for a brief second, Daniel, could you also highlight the Gyre Lynch team that is on the call? I think I saw 2 or 3 folks tuning in.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Matusik. My apologies for the oversight. I'll turn it to you, and thank you, Ms. Danowski, for your indulgence.
All right, thanks. Hi everyone. David Hildy with Gyre Lynch. Happy to be here. Also got with me Kathy Pusker and Lauren Riley with Walsh Colucci.
My apologies again. I'm obviously very grateful that y'all are here, and certainly a necessity that you be here. So apologies for skipping past you. Thank you, Mr. Matusik. Thank you, Ms. Danowski.
All right, thank you. So next, I wanted to share the county board actions and also Gyre Lynch and community engagement that has taken place over the past couple of years. So immediately after Gyre Lynch's acquisition in December 2021, Gyre Lynch conducted resident outreach and engagement that helped inform their Master Financing and Development Plan, or MFDP. And the Gyre Lynch MFDP for the property describes the initial Gyre Lynch proposal for how Barcroft Apartments would be renovated or developed in the long term. And Gyre Lynch submitted a preliminary draft of this plan in October 2022. Also, a use permit was approved this past summer for the first renovation phase that contains 93 units. So since the middle of the Gyre Lynch MFDP, staff and the Gyre Lynch team have been focused on review and analysis, as well as engagement with residents and the larger community. So, for example, Gyre Lynch hosted town halls for the residents and also attended commission and other stakeholder meetings to receive feedback. And finally, in December, the county board approved several items. A second renovation phase use permit, a site-wide affordable housing financing plan, which I'll talk about in the next couple of slides, and the necessary documents so Gyre Lynch can finance the first renovation, and authorization of a grant funding application that was sent to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. If this application is successful, it would provide another funding source for future renovations at Barcroft. Next slide. In case it's helpful, we pulled guidance from 2 previous county board sessions in which board members shared their vision for future development potential and the opportunities presented within this community. Some of the board members' remarks during these sessions focused on thinking big and bringing forward amenities that could serve residents and the broader community. Gyre Lynch had an opportunity to hear this vision and balance it with the economics of the site, which have changed dramatically since the acquisition. Gyre Lynch's land use proposal attempts to find the sweet spot in considering additional density with what the market can absorb. It also demonstrates boldness with the affordability proposals the county board considered in December to meet resident needs and deepen affordability, among other things. Next slide. So as mentioned, part of the county board actions in December included county board approval of the financing and affordability plan. So first and foremost, the affordability and financing plan included the continuing commitment to no displacement of current residents. And this includes a commitment to rent stabilization. Rent stabilization means that as portions of Barcroft apartments are renovated or rebuilt, those residents earning at or below 80% of the area median income, or AMI, will be able to move back to a substantially renovated or new construction home while maintaining their current rents capped at 3% annual increases. And for reference, in 2023, 80% AMI for a family of 4 is approximately $120,000. So property management, Gate Hudson, also continues to work on a case-by-case basis with those residents who shared they were unable to afford a rent increase to possibly waive or reduce their rent increase and connect them to county subsidy programs and services. So in addition to the commitment to no displacement, Gyre Lynch and the county are committed to helping residents with very low incomes at the property. So this includes providing at least 134 units across the property for residents who earn up to 30% AMI. And 30% AMI for a family of 4 is approximately $45,000 in 2023. So these units will be provided over time while units are renovated and constructed. And additional support of very low-income residents will be provided through subsidy programs, such as the county's housing grants program. And Gyre Lynch will also provide up to 10% of the committed affordable units for permanent supportive housing clients to be phased in upon unit turnover and over the course of the 10-year redevelopment period. And those are in addition to the 134 units committed at 30% AMI. So the county is committed to meeting deepening affordability needs while also capturing savings that may be available to manage the $150 million county acquisition fund loan that was used to help Gyre Lynch acquire the property. These anticipated savings are important due to the significant increase in the cost of capital to the county because interest rates have jumped dramatically since the 2021 acquisition. For example, debt service on the county's short-term $150 million line of credit is currently $9 million interest only, which is more than 4 times what was originally projected at the time of acquisition in 2021. And the increase is coming directly out of the county's annual Affordable Housing Investment Fund appropriation. Lastly, the financing and affordability plan approved by the county board in December took into account Gyre Lynch's proposed land use proposal, which will be discussed as part of these working group meetings. If changes are made to Gyre Lynch's land use proposal that Gyre Lynch indicates would impact the financial and affordability terms the county board approved in December 2023, it would prompt broader conversations within the county and Amazon. And unless and until that happens, the financial and affordability terms approved in December reflect the Gyre Lynch County and Amazon commitments in those areas, and it would take county board action to amend those commitments. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matt Matusik.
Thanks, Melissa. And I want to leave this on for another extra second because this is something we're going to come back to throughout the process, perhaps not at this level of detail, but a reminder that this commitment is not something that we've had to deal with as we previously envisioned Columbia Pike and particularly the site. And while probably not as visible over the next couple of months, this is going to be a very fixed variable as we consider what could happen, what should happen, and how we do that on the Barcroft apartments. So it's really important to, I think, start this presentation with a reminder of what the commitment is. And really, I think, emphasize that this is actually one of the main reasons why we're even able to meet and discuss this project. Because absent of this intervention, we would be having a very different conversation and one that I think everybody really appreciates we got to avoid. So I think you're going to see this information continue to come up week to week as we kind of dive into other topics that we'll cover later in this presentation. But for those that perhaps maybe are not as familiar with the property, one of the things you're going to start to see is really kind of a breakdown of how these 60 acres came to be, how were they constructed over time, what is so special about them, what are some of the site characteristics. But this information gives you a sense of generally how the unit structure is broken down, and overall how we actually get to the 1,300 plus units across the entire property here. In addition to that, we also wanted to highlight some of the planning processes that have taken place in the past. There was a significant attention being paid starting in the 1990s, but specifically near 2000, where some of the initial planning efforts really emphasized the need to revitalize the commercial areas of the corridor. So the horizontal timeline that you see on the top of the screen is really capturing some of the major milestones of how we did that and some of the engagement that took place with the community to first target some key intersections along Columbia Pike. That essentially represented what we call the Columbia Pike Initiative Phase 1, focusing on those commercial areas. A number of years later, there was a return to that planning effort with the second phase, and this would capture all the remaining portions of Columbia Pike, primarily targeting the residential areas in between those commercial centers. And you can see that bottom timeline there of an even longer engagement window where a lot of community feedback and consensus was established on what we want to see on a lot of different properties, among which Barcroft. The reason we are highlighting both of them is because both the commercial and the residential planning efforts indicated some level of expectations and what the vision might be for different parts of Barcroft. Geographically, another way of explaining that is if you look at the final outcome of where we ended up, the orange areas are identifying those commercial areas, the blue are identifying the residential ones. So if you really consider where Barcroft Apartments is located, it actually kind of shares a number of characteristics with both documents. So as we'll go through this process, you're going to see us reference both that commercial vision that was established almost 2 decades ago now, and then the more residential one that is about a decade old. And there will be some, I think, opportunities to kind of merge the two such that it makes more sense, and I think it's a logical approach to moving forward, given where we are with the apartments. More recently, I think it's also worth highlighting that Jair Lynch has done an extensive amount of engagement with the residents themselves, some of whom are represented in this process, and many of whom we're going to be engaging with over the coming weeks, specifically to make sure that in addition to the more urgent needs, the immediate needs that I think had to be addressed when Jair Lynch took over, really kind of get their sense of, have they had a chance to even think about the long-term vision, some of the bigger changes that are possible, and the way in which I think those changes could address some of their needs. So we're going to continue that engagement and have various in-person and virtual opportunities to hear from them, and really review this process as kind of an effort to implement what their thoughts already are. In addition to that previous policy I just mentioned, the ideas that I think have been collected over the last year or two really I think are going to bleed into and inform our upcoming conversations. So next we wanted to cover, again, at a high level, just what is that policy? And just to give you a preview of what the next few meetings might look like. We mentioned obviously those 2 Columbia Pike initiatives dating back to the early 2000s. The reason we're going to continue to revisit those closely is because they have the most detailed layer of information related to Barcroft. They really zoom down into key specific implementation strategies, what the full build-out scenario might look like if the site actually, proceeds with this renovation and revitalization. But if we step back, there are actually many other policies that have broader guidance that apply throughout the county that we still need to incorporate into this upcoming process. We've listed them here, and we're not going to go into too much detail for each one, but as you'll see in the upcoming meetings, we are going to have an opportunity to drill down and see just exactly what those policies say so that we can kind of marry them with the Columbia Pike documents that are much more explicit and then figure out what is the best strategy here, all the while returning to what Melissa just started with, the affordability commitments that still have to be satisfied. So as we do that, it's really important to emphasize that our starting position is not the existing conditions on the property, which do inform a lot of different elements, but it's really that vision document that is captured in those two Columbia Pike documents. So the exhibit you see here in the middle indicates and really combines both commercial and residential visions for Barcroft, essentially highlighting elements of the site that were previously envisioned for preservation and some of the edge conditions along 4 Mile Run and Columbia Pike that were envisioned for redevelopment. It's kind of the distinction between the darker orange color and the lighter orange that's faded in the background. And if you compare that to the J.I. Lynch proposal, there's a lot of similarities there. You can see that redevelopment is focused along 4 Mile Run, Columbia Pike, essentially concentrating density along those northeast and northwest corners, while kind of the central element of Barcroft and the southern tip are preserved, which was similarly envisioned in those earlier planning efforts. The proposal in front of us also has and continues to deliver planned street connections, planned public parks, elements that we also envisioned would be likely and expected with any kind of redevelopment. So one of the things we're going to be doing as we go forward is obviously assisting this entire roster of stakeholders to kind of give you a sense of what staff has already considered in reviewing this, dating back to last year, and grouping that review into kind of 4 key categories, starting with kind of the balancing act of how much of the site needs to be preserved, how much of it could redevelop, and where does that happen? What are the impacts of that decision? Looking at the transportation network and parking, as well as the public open spaces and natural areas that I think this property is already rich with. And then finally, the urban design element, building heights, how they transition to existing buildings that might be preserved, the orientation of some of these developable footprints. So all these things are going to be reviewed, but we did want to start off with, even as a homework assignment, to shed some light on where we actually see a lot of consistencies. A great starting point because J.I. Lynch really took into account and build upon the vision that we established because of how heavily we engaged the community to develop that. So this slide kind of just summarizes where we see those consistencies and really kind of save us a lot of time in terms of what we need to really still study further. And what we do need to kind of dive further into are kind of minor deviations from that policy vision that we had. Again, using the same 4 categories, right? Preservation, parking, transportation, public open space, and urban design, and evaluating the new direction that's being taken, because some things have shifted around, but I think in an interesting way that allow us to re-envision what I think Barcroft could become. So I think we see some merit in some of the moves that happened, but I think we just need to study them further and hear from you all in terms of the trade-offs that are happening in the direction that this is heading into. And we wanted to make sure that this was kind of a collaborative process where not only I think Columbia Pike residents were informed and participated, but also some of the more county-wide perspectives that we see in other site plan and form-based code projects that can inform that conversation. So I think we have a pretty interesting mix of perspectives here. In terms of how are we all going to communicate and share that perspective, I do want to touch on the community engagement that I think we're structuring for this process. And with the help of Erica and Elise and some other staff, we've been able to kind of group this in a way where we're not going to tackle everything at once. There's too much information here. This is a really dense topic. It involves obviously visioning. It involves some technical zoning ordinance issues. And the way I think we want to approach this is to kind of address some of the bigger questions up front. What is the vision? Where do we want to see streets and parks, buildings, and preservation? And once I think we've settled on what that updated vision is, right? Again, building upon what we've done a decade ago, then we can spend the second half of the year of actually implementing through changes to the form-based code. And for those that are less familiar, the form-based code is just part of the zoning ordinance that allows us to implement the vision for Barcroft through a specific zoning tool that developers use to redevelop the sites. Those documents get really in depth in terms of very prescriptive set of expectations for every single property. It's kind of like a manual for the architects and engineers. So we don't want to dive right into that level of information and get your thoughts because it is somewhat overwhelming and really not necessary at this stage. We'd rather kind of start at a higher level discussion and just figure out the big moving pieces that are happening and make sure they're in the right place. So that's kind of the focus of the first half of the year, and the reason why you see so much engagement being planned there, because in the second half of the year, I think we can return more to the typical form-based code advisory working group, the zoning committee or the planning commission, and the way that they usually address some of these zoning changes when appropriate. If it wasn't evident through the introductions at the beginning, this is the full roster. So you can see here kind of the full breadth of perspectives and experiences. I think it's going to be really healthy to the conversations. And we really hope that people can kind of just listen to each other and learn from one another because we all have something to contribute. And I think through that, we're going to really achieve a good product that I think we can all point to and be proud of for Barcroft. We're also highlighting staff that's involved. So you can see here various departments. Again, kind of a full breadth of experience, not only in typically working to develop vision documents for the county, but also many of these folks were the ones that are reviewing applications as they come in for redevelopment. So we're making sure that as we update the vision for Barcroft, we're setting ourselves up for success when applications actually come in. And the one thing I wanted to also emphasize is the purpose of the group is really critical. I think we're all appreciative that everybody is able to accept the invitation and join us. But what we really want to make sure is this information is something you can convey to everyone else that might be looking for you to represent their perspectives in this group, since we obviously can't invite everybody along the corridor. And in between meetings, that we're going to be on a kind of a every 3-week interval. We do expect and hope that many of you can kind of return to your respective neighborhoods and organizations and kind of relay what you heard, what you've discussed, and bring back other perspectives or questions that you might be facing when you return to those neighborhoods and organizations. So I think through that, we're going to be able to address as much information as we can. And hearing what your feedback is that you've collected really informs some of the information we want to present in subsequent meetings. So we're really relying on you to, I think, have that additional engagement so we can do our best to hear from everybody. And then additionally, we talked about that first half of the year. This is kind of the high-level summary of what we're anticipating. This is a lot, but I think it's really helpful once you look at it for quite a little bit of time. You can see in the symbols where the working group meetings are going to be scheduled, essentially from early February to mid-May, beyond which we anticipate to return to the county board with some recommendations and guidance based on what we've kind of discovered and discussed here. But in between those opportunities, we do anticipate additional engagement with the broader community. So folks who can't be here or were not identified as representatives, we are going to be meeting with them. We are going to have online surveys. There is going to be an open house. So plenty of opportunities to make sure that they have a chance to weigh in and inform this process. As it helps in your individual scheduling and anticipation of topics, those 4 major categories that I mentioned earlier, we are tentatively identifying them for these upcoming agendas. So if you look at the next 4 working group meetings, there's going to be another one later this month, and essentially one every 3 weeks after that. This is how we're trying to approach those key subject areas, all of which will have unique, presentations and key questions we want to pose. And then finally, in mid-May, what we're hoping for is that by that point, after covering everything and after having our open house, we're going to be able to come back and start to, share some key updates, draft recommendations, and some conclusions to the work that's taking place. Because after that, we really want to start to finalize that information for the county board. One thing you can expect to see in those upcoming working group meetings are going to be the development of planning principles. So for each topic that you see here, we're going to be working with you to really refine some language that, in addition to all the other updates that we're preparing and recommendations that are going to be made, some of which might apply to the Gyre Lynch proposal, some of which might apply to the policy documents we have. But these planning principles, all right, I think I'm back. I'm clearly talking for too long. But I believe I was talking about the planning principles, where we're trying to establish just some guidance for future conversations we need to have. We're going to do our best job to obviously answer and solve as much as we can in the first 5 months of this analysis, but there's going to be other decision points that happen later. Maybe as projects come in, maybe as additional updates need to be considered. So this type of guidance is going to be structured in a way that helps us address trade-offs and other considerations, and hopefully reflects some of the guidance we're receiving from the stakeholders. So for tonight, what we wanted to do is really start a preview of what future working group meetings might be. And that is to, following our presentations, to kind of give you all the information we believe you need to have a conversation and give us productive feedback. We want to start with some kind of structured questions, because one thing we don't really have at this point is whatever all of you have, I think, have considered before arriving to this meeting. If there's things you already heard from your community or your organization that you think is critical to share, that's really helpful. But really looking at some key questions that I think are going to open the floor up to considering, what do we need to address? Is there something kind of brewing that subsequent working group meeting may need to focus on? And if you already thought about, some vision updates that you think, based on your experience living in Barcroft, visiting Barcroft, driving by it, that really should be considered now. So anything that you feel you can contribute to some of these questions, we would definitely want to hear from you. And we have plenty more to share, but this should kind of get us started. So I'm going to come back to this one, but our last slide is just contact information. Olivia and I are kind of leading the land use process, and Melissa can answer just about every kind of Barcroft question there is. So we'll be posting these on the study website. You can see the link here, and just highlighting our next meeting is on the 26th, where we're going to be discussing that balance between preservation and new development. So I'm going to go back and leave this slide up and then hand things back to Daniel.
All right, thank you all. We have our four sort of major questions that are our charge. But before we get into any thoughts on that, I want to invite people to ask any questions. I want to try to get people to, I want to encourage people to stick to clarifying or factual questions rather than, initial feedback, because there'll be plenty of time for that both later this evening and later in the project. So do we have any questions for the group? And actually, before Mr. Schneider, before we go to that, there are more people on the meeting than were when we did introductions. So I want to also invite anyone who has joined since we did introductions to turn your camera on and introduce yourselves. This is Maren. She's one of the people who's joining us new, but not she's not on the roster. All right. If anyone who is joining us, we have another. I see we have another person who's calling in by phone as well. That 517-213 number. If you've got the email address. Well, we sort of ask that you unmute yourself with *6 and remute yourself with *6 again when you have any questions or would like to provide feedback. hope that you find a way of identifying who you are and where you're with, and we'll try to check on you as well. Oh, I see you might be off mute, so I'll defer to you.
This is Ed Miltenberger representing Columbia Heights Civic Association, and my apologies for being late.
I'm glad that you're here. Thank you, Ed. And as I said to Julie as well, we will. I will try to check in on the two of you periodically. But if you need to be recognized, and I have not had a chance to do so, or perhaps have forgotten to do so, I've asked Mr. Matuszek and Ms. Sontag to send an email with my cell phone number as well, and feel encouraged to send me a message letting you know that you want to be recognized. With that, Mr. Schneider.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm sure this question has probably been asked, and if you ask it in different groups, maybe I'd get different answers, but representing both the Columbia Pike Partnership and having relationships both with the county and with Gyre Lynch. Obviously, there are a lot of stakeholders in this project. I guess I'm looking for some clarification or just some alignment between, the audacity and the kind of once in a generation opportunity with the realities of doing major development in this economic environment. And what is the interplay between Gyre Lynch and the county in terms of how we develop this collective vision, right? Because economic realities are going to kind of come up against our visioning and community audacity, and just wondering what that interplay is between the county and the developer.
So if I could maybe take a first stab at it, and then Matt and Olivia can chime in. So again, Melissa Danowski with the Housing Division. So in regards to maybe your second question, the interplay with county and Gyre Lynch as we realize the collective vision. So the county did loan $150 million to Gyre Lynch to acquire the property and keep it affordable. And that is the partnership we have. But that said, we're also looking at, now as we enter this land use phase, we are looking at how their proposal, interacts with previous county plans and policies. And, I think as we go through this next phase, we'll be looking for your input as well. It's true that we'll be seeing how adjustments may or may not impact financing and affordability commitments, but that doesn't mean to not, propose something or see how it goes. It's just going to have to be a conversation.
Thank you, Ms. Danowski. Any other initial clarifying questions? Ms. Stallhut.
Hi, I think this is a question for Melissa, a little bit related to that. I actually had a question about the financing, and I think I missed it when you were presenting, but you were talking about the $9 million that was, what were you saying? The $9 million?
Yeah.
I didn't fully catch that. Like, that's coming out of the county budget now. Can you just go over that again?
Sure. So the $150 million was actually a line of credit. And that line of credit has debt service on it. And it's, the rate is adjustable, and currently the debt service on that $150 million line of credit is $9 million. And so our Affordable Housing Investment Fund, that debt service is primarily coming out of our Affordable Housing Investment Fund, which is, our main funding mechanism for sustaining and creating affordable housing throughout the county.
Commissioner Berkey, your camera is on. Do you have a question?
No, not at this time. Sorry.
All right. I don't see any other hands. I want to give a quick moment just to make sure that the people who are with us by phone have an opportunity to *6 themselves off of mute if you have a question. If not, then I want to entertain any feedback or any responses or thoughts to the second question, the what do you consider an important aspect of Barcroft's experience that should be maintained as its future vision is updated? With Joan Lawrence.
Thank you. Well, Barcroft, as everyone is aware, is one of the garden apartment complexes that was built beginning in the early 40s and some maybe a little before that. And the garden apartment movement provided a place for people to live with open spaces, greenery, trees, and that and the campus as it is now is actually a wonderful example of the garden apartment movement. And I think that feeling, that garden apartment feeling, and of course having a bias toward preservation of the historic buildings, but certainly any redevelopment needs to take into account the original purpose of putting in garden apartments and the quality of life effects that providing the open space provides. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that feedback. One thing that I think is I'll for want of any other hands or cameras that are up, I'll recognize myself just to note that a thing that I think is an important aspect of Barcroft's experience. I don't know how we maintain it, but I think that it's important to have a conversation about it. Is the existing businesses that are presently community facing and serving the community within Barcroft Apartments. Primarily, that's the strip mall on Columbia Pike at 4 Mile Run Minor and Buchanan. I don't know whether or how those community serving businesses can be preserved when the time comes for any redevelopment of that building. But I don't want it to be, if they're not, if we don't have a way of continuing to help those businesses serve the community, I don't want it to be for want of trying. That's that. Anyone else want to be recognized on this point? Commissioner Slatt.
Yeah, I'm gonna take off my transportation hat and just speak as a Columbia Pike resident for a minute, and say that for me, Barcroft's real legacy is the people that is allowed to live in Arlington. I know a bunch of people who started out at Barcroft and then moved, continued to stay in Arlington as they moved into other residential neighborhoods and stuff over the years. And I think it's the fact that it has been this sort of toehold of affordability for so long that I think really makes Barcroft special. And I just hope, as we're talking about the conservation districts and what the future vision of Barcroft is, that we're careful not to potentially jeopardize that affordability and that ability to bring us new and awesome and interesting neighbors, just to try to hold on to a look or an experience from the past. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Slatt. Before I go to you, Commissioner Berkey, I want to give staff the opportunity, not asking you to, but want to at least give you an opportunity to weigh in on anything that's been said so far.
I can start. I actually appreciate everything we've heard so far. Hopefully it's a warm up for everybody else to dive in. And this really could feel like an informal exercise. I don't want to give the impression that this needs to be some type of a formal meeting where people are, I think, somewhat timid about sharing their perspectives. I think the more we hear, I think the better this is going to be. And particularly just from extracting what I think I've heard is, it's not just about the affordability and the people that are there, but I'm actually hearing, maintaining some level of retail along Columbia Pike, which is has become a part of Barcroft that is, more than just the apartments. And then the quality of life, affordability, I think, is a certain aspect of how we can intervene and support, right, residents living there and the cost of living that's involved, particularly in Arlington. But the other aspects of quality of life are the experience that you have because it's a garden style complex that has these courtyards, that has the open space and the tree canopy. So if that's really important, and studies have shown that it's critical to your well-being, how do we consider that as growth occurs and is expected? So that's definitely very interesting, and we're taking good notes.
Thank you, Mr. Matuzik. If there's no one else from staff who wants to weigh in, I'm going to go to Commissioner Berkey.
Thanks. It's really not fair always having to follow Commissioner Slatt. I thought that was pretty well said. And I was going to say something similar. I think it's really important that we, as a community, and especially with the thorough, input on many levels, and I think we'll talk about this as the process goes along, of the current Barcroft residents, really make sure that we're not taking away from their current, the current living experience, the current livability, and obviously seek to enhance that. And so I think, living in Douglas Park, right next to Barcroft apartments, there are a lot of families, there are a lot of kids. Kids are able to ride bikes, and there is sort of kind of a tranquil feel to it. And I think that that's something that we do want to work to preserve. Also, as somebody who is typically, with regards to cars and transportation, and this is maybe more for number 3 here, we typically talk about, maybe reducing parking and things like that. But there are a lot of folks at Barcroft Apartments who do require automobiles for their jobs, especially if they're in certain industries. And so to the extent that we talk about parking, it's always everybody's favorite topic. I do want us to be mindful of that, that there may be some needs for parking that are a bit different if this were, say, a market rate site plan project, and we're kind of going through that process. So I want us just to be very cognizant of that. Thanks.
Commissioner Berkey, I want to acknowledge that we are joined by Kitty Stevenson, who is filling in for MVAHA and is with us primarily, it seems, in listen-only mode this evening. Thank you for being here with us tonight. Anything else on this topic too? And this isn't the last time tonight to weigh in on it, but I do want to invite everyone to weigh in on it, because I think it's one of the more important questions is what do we consider to be an important aspect of Barcroft's experience that should be maintained as its future vision is updated. I'm not seeing any hands or lights, so I want to specifically call out any questions or thoughts as to this third question. Are there any elements or issues that you want to make sure are also addressed through the course of this limited study? I'm going to go to Catherine first, and then to Mike Hannon, and then to Karen Odant.
Hi, Kathy Guernsey, Columbia Forest, and also a Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group member. This will come as no surprise to fellow org members, but I want to make sure that we are being thoughtful and intentional around aspects of accessibility and inclusion for residents with disabilities of all ages, mindful that we want to have an intergenerational community where people can age in place. And I really appreciated the comments around transportation and wanting to ensure that we're thoughtful, that we're not inadvertently perhaps causing harm to colleagues who might need different aspects of transportation in terms of parking and where parking is located and those sorts of things. So I know obviously there are regulations that must be complied with, but I think we have an opportunity here to go a little bit beyond that and be really thoughtful and intentional to make sure that we're helping to develop a community that's really accessible and inclusive for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Guernsey. Mr. Hanna, and after I do these four speakers through these well, now the next three, then Mr. Matuzek, Ms. Sontag, Ms. Danowski, I'll kick it back to you for any responses you want to weigh in with. So, Mr. Hanna.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I agree, first of all, with pretty much everything that's been said so far. One aspect of the site that I'd like to see some improvement on is that it's a bit isolated from a pedestrian and bicycle standpoint. It's kind of a little bit isolated. It's all surrounded by busy streets. I was really encouraged to note that staff, I guess, had identified the 12th Street Bike Boulevard as an issue, and the bike element showing that coming through this. At this point, it sort of ends, kind of dumps you on George Mason. There's no way really safely to get either to Columbia Pike or to the WNOD. So I really would like to see that be incorporated, as well as kind of an easier pedestrian pathway. And this kind of goes to the accessibility issue as well, towards commercial properties along Columbia Pike from the inside of the community, so that folks feel a safe and easy way to get to the businesses.
Thank you, Mr. Hanna. Ms. O'Dowd. And
Hi, this is
I'm going to apologize also for any boot names that I butcher. I will aspire to be better.
It's perfect. Thank you. Commissioner O'Dowd from the Disability Advisory Commission. Catherine, you stole my thunder, but I'd like to be a little bit more specific. This is an incredible opportunity to not only meet standards for the Americans with Disabilities Act, but really demonstrate as a committee, as a county, what we value. So obviously there's minimum standards for physical spaces inside the property, on the grounds, in public spaces. And it's really a tremendous opportunity, and to focus on accessibility for folks with disabilities that are perhaps easier to identify, but to be forward leaning in terms of neurological and hidden disabilities. So this is really an opportunity to show what we value as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. You'll have to forgive me. The name displaying is David Howell, but if I remember right, it is not, in fact, David Howell who's with us. So I will go to you. And then before I go to you, Commissioner Berkey, I'm going to go to staff as promised.
Commissioner Weir, yeah, this is David Howell, actually, and I may not be.
My apologies.
I may not be at all 5 meetings, but I am here tonight. So I just wanted to add a thought about a design and guidance paradigm for this whole project, which would be based on the Arlington County Board resolution in 2019 on biophilic Arlington. That resolution made a commitment to conserving and enhancing and developing with urban nature as a part of our plans and policies. And I think that is a key to successful achievement of a future-oriented and human well-being oriented project here. We're making an enormously strong effort and very good in every way, ethically in every way, to avoid displacement and to provide the kind of housing that we need. And I think that part of making this the kind of place that's possible and the kind of place that's most desirable from a human health point of view, from an environmental point of view, is to make sure that that a kind of biophilic paradigm be the basis for a lot of the decisions that are made, whether that's the use of space, the arrangement of buildings, the footprints, conservation of natural assets, structure sizes, and in particular, just as a general theme within this, consideration of the unbuilt spaces as being as important in the design decisions as the built spaces. People who are involved in planning and design sometimes talk about negative space, which is the space that's left over when you do things. But I think the negative space is actually not negative. I think these days there's a consideration that the space that's there has value, and what you do to it, including building the buildings, is important, but no more important than what you leave. And then when it comes around to things like arranging around historic trees or taking into account the topography and the possibility for natural areas that can be used as outdoor space, that to me that keys into the history, it keys into the preferences of the population, and it keys into a future environment that is worthy of the investment of this project. We shouldn't want to limit ourselves to plunking down some buildings that are on the cutting edge of 2005. We should really want this to be spectacular way long after it's all done, and be something that could end up on the front of professional journals as an example, as a precedent that we can be proud of.
Thank you, Mr. Howell. And I am now, Commissioner Howell, I'm now realizing that I skipped over Mr. Hanna. So I'm going to go to you and then to staff, then to Commissioner Berkey. And Mr. Hanna, my apologies. I did not mean to skip over you.
You didn't. I spoke.
Oh, okay, great. That's good to know. I was worried that I was.
Hope it wasn't too forgettable. But yeah.
Everyone is forgettable when your 4-year-old is showing you everything that they've been drawing for the last hour. It's just you can't really compete. So I'm going to go to staff and then Commissioner Berkey.
I can jump in unless others have a thought. So Olivia, you want to go first?
Go ahead, Matt. I'll go after you.
I mean, I don't want to pick specific comments because everything is important, and I love what I'm hearing. I love seeing the hands go up. We're asking the right questions. I think what really resonated with me was what David just mentioned, because what I continue to hear from a lot of people is kind of another way of framing the question. And that is, what can we reference Barcroft when this is all done as a good example of how to do something? And it already is pretty visible that we're doing that with the affordability commitments, which on its own, I think should, overshadow everything else. But if there are opportunities to, I think, go a step further in kind of prioritizing the quality of life elements and kind of meeting our other commitments that we've made elsewhere in the county with, the biophilic treatments and design principles, what better place to start than 60 acres of, so many natural assets. And if you consider really what's happening here, I know the attention seems to be going away to most of the redevelopment footprints and how much new density might be added. But I think what you're going to see in these meetings is that a significant majority of the geographic space of the property is going to be maintained as is, with kind of strategic interventions to preserve those courtyards and the landscape areas. So if there's an opportunity to build on that, and I think target some of the things that David mentioned, I think that would be an incredible win for this property, and something that maybe we could point to at some point and say, that was a great move. So I'm definitely looking for those type of ideas and find a way to incorporate that into our conversation.
Thank you. Anyone, Ms. Sontag or anyone else?
Yeah, I think Matt captured that really well. And again, lots of great comments coming our way. So sorry if we skip over anything, but did want to jump back to Commissioner Berkey's comment about parking. That is something that we've also heard in some of our engagement with residents. The applicants also heard that too. So certainly something we're thinking about. And then as well as the kind of accessibility, there's a lot of challenging terrain on this site, but as we're looking at, preservation and renovation of some of these units, we are looking for opportunities, and the applicant's looking at opportunities to provide some of those accessible pathways and accessible units.
Thank you. If nothing more, we'll go to Commissioner Berkey and then Ms. Dye.
Great. That's a great segue. Olivia's talking about, you're talking about accessibility. And again, this might be, what I'm about to say might be slightly outside the scope here, but we're kind of talking and making notes here, right? And so, one of the big borders of this property, of course, is South George Mason Drive between 4 Mile Run and Columbia Pike. Columbia Pike itself is getting quite a lot of attention right now in that area with Pike Forward, and so there's a lot of new infrastructure being built out there. But when I think of that stretch of George Mason, obviously it divides, it separates Barcroft from Doctors Run Park and the rest of the neighborhood. It certainly separates it, from some retail. And when I think about that stretch versus Glebe Road, which is also through our neighborhood, Glebe is really a separator, and it's so frustrating because as far as kind of connecting the neighborhood, thinking of the bike boulevard, just thinking of a more connected community, especially not in an automobile. Glebe Road is just such a lost opportunity. There's no median anyway. There's no trees. It's incredibly dangerous. I think we're fortunate now where we do have a median. We already have some better conditions on South George Mason. My comment is essentially, if we can think about this as a way to better connect, Barcroft to the rest of the neighborhood. We're not getting rid of George Mason Drive. We certainly have several crosswalks there, but I think both the preservation that's going to be going on as well as the new redevelopment is going to sort of demand more of a connectivity. Doctors Run Park will be even more of an attractive, public facility, with new neighbors and residents, is certainly maybe going to get more attention from Parks and Rec. And so if there are ways, if it really is, transportation, really looking at the crosswalks again, really trying to see if there's ways that we can, slightly slow traffic between 4 Mile Run and Columbia Pike, and really just make it so that's a bit more of a walkable stretch, and it's not just, you go zoom because you're trying to make it, all the way down to Route 7. I think I would like to see that sort of in the general kind of vision for Barcroft long term. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Berkey. Going to Ms. Dye.
Thank you. Building on that, in terms of the planned or proposed redevelopment of the southeast corner of George Mason and Columbia Pike, if there's an opportunity to daylight Doctors Run itself and possibly have a wonderful transition from new development on that southeast corner to fold in a daylighted section of Doctors Run, and then we've got Doctors Run Park immediately to the south. So just wanted to put that on the table. If there's an opportunity to daylight Doctors Run and integrate it with new development, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything else on this discussion of elements or issues that we want to make sure are also addressed through the course of this study? And if not, and I want to give just a moment to allow anyone who's with us by telephone to *6 off mute. I'll be able to see if you do, and I'm not seeing it. Great. All right, we have Mr. Milton Berger.
Yes, good evening, everybody. I'm sorry I missed the first part of the meeting, but I did want to ask, looking over our email of the membership of the committee, I'm very gratified to see so many different organizations represented. And I'm sorry if this isn't the appropriate time, but I only see one person representing the actual Barcroft Resident Council. I guess I would like clarification on how many residents of Barcroft are able to participate in this meeting as an official, in an official capacity.
So I can jump in on that one. So I think with this working group, there is one representative from each group, but we are absolutely engaging the resident council as well as all residents that live at Barcroft. So in addition to these working group meetings, there will also be various pop-ups at Barcroft for the residents and larger community to seek feedback. We're also planning an open house, and we also will plan to work with the resident council to be invited to go to future resident council meetings directly to receive their input as well.
Okay, that's fine that we go to their council and receive their input there, but this is where the discussion is taking place. So I wonder if we could possibly allow a few more spaces for people that actually live in Barcroft to also participate in a formal way.
So I see our communication specialist, Erica Moore, popped on camera.
Yes, so we did talk a lot about how we could bring the residents into this, and I think a lot of this, in terms of their participation in the formal process, has been ongoing. So this proposal does reflect engagement with the residents and what the residents have told Gyre Lynch that they want to see at their community. And so a lot of that engagement actually has already happened. And certainly as conversations continue, as Melissa just said, we've been in contact with both the property management with how we can best get in with residents, and also with the resident council and Gyre Lynch themselves on how we can bring some of these ideas back to as many residents as we can, and continue to ask for their feedback and their input on many of these same issues, and then bring that information back to this working group as data and information for you all to consider and hear through there. So it is, and we would love to be able to just open it up, but we really felt, just like the civic associations have representatives and a single representative for the whole community, we wanted to align with that, and that was something that the resident council agreed with, and we got a volunteer to do that. But we will be working really strategically to ensure that residents all through Barcroft have an opportunity to continue to be engaged throughout this process.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yep.
Yeah, if I can put a finer point on it, everything Erica just mentioned, and Melissa as well, is establishing kind of a chronological progress of feedback and implementation of ideas that you're going to see, where starting with the residents themselves, informing the actual proposal that we have from Gyre Lynch, to now us figuring out, is that proposal going to require some policy updates to be implemented, or in some areas does it need to evolve slightly further where we don't think that might be possible? To help answer those questions, we're going to have to bridge the gap where we still have some feedback from residents, but then start to bring in the folks that are usually involved in that type of implementation, where either the zoning ordinance needs to be amended, the master transportation plan, the general land use plan, and other documents as well. And that's something that we absolutely need to hear from other commissioners and representatives that typically deal with this stuff throughout the county. So it's kind of a very mixed and diverse group that you see here. And I think we're being very mindful that additional and supplemental engagement will be still needed, despite all the work that already went into it with the residents.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Commissioner Berkey.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to speak to that, and maybe Daniel, if you wanted to. I think that's right, and you know, as a fellow kind of community member, I mean, I really appreciate the question. And, you know, in talking to staff, you know, who developed the idea of this working group, obviously, and got buy-in from the county board, you know, I think it's fair to say from the county board level, you know, staff level, and then at least speaking for myself, you know, making sure that everybody's working together so that we have really, really strong participation, input, thoughts, concerns, all of that from current Barcroft residents is pretty much at the top of my list in participating in this process. You know, we have a lot of different ideas. And I think part of that is what Erica was alluding to, which is that, you know, we're going to have these meetings, you know, and Matt and Olivia and Melissa have laid out this process, but there's going to be other opportunities. And, you know, sometimes these meetings aren't necessarily the best for everybody to participate. And so, you know, we have to continue to work as a community to find ways for folks to, you know, participate in their own way and their own time, right? And so I think that's essentially what Erica and staff is going to be working on. And I think it's safe to say Daniel and I will be closely a part of that, and you know, certainly welcome input, but that's an extremely high priority for me. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Eric, and likewise. You know, it's the point is well made that it's not enough. That the point is well made that this is a project that needs to include the residents, and the residents do have a seat at this table. It's unfortunate that we don't have anyone from the Residents Council tonight, but as has been said, you know, we're that there's certainly there's going to continue to be outreach, both between now and the next meeting, and regarding this meeting, and then other outreach as well. So I share the concerns. I share Commissioner Berkey's priorities and concerns. I think that we are now at the next sort of general topic of where do we see major opportunities on the site that could be addressed through redevelopment or other interventions. Commissioner Slatt.
Hey, thank you. And I super appreciate Mike Hanna and to some extent Commissioner Berkey for kind of setting me up a little bit on transportation. I totally agree about kind of the moat-like wall around Barcroft. It feels like sometimes with the crazy traffic and the big roads. I wanted to speak to one specific opportunity though, which is that I really feel like we learned through the George Mason Drive study process that the intersection of George Mason Drive and 4 Mile Run is one that the county is really having trouble cracking from a safety standpoint, because there are just so many roads that all come together with so many movements going so many directions. And I do think there's an opportunity here we need to really think about seizing, which is that a portion there of 4 Mile Run Minor is really only serving Barcroft apartments. And there may be a real opportunity to kind of rework how that portion of the transportation and road network works to simplify 4 Mile Run and George Mason Drive to make it, you know, safer for everybody that is using that intersection, whether they're, you know, walking on the WNOD trail or biking through or driving, you know, down to Barcroft Community Center to take gymnastics or something. I think we really need to be looking at what are the opportunities as part of Barcroft to take some load off of that tough and complicated intersection. Thanks.
I'm going to go to Mr. Schneider.
So many tasks before you start speaking, you know. My only overall thought, less specific than Chris's, but just only having been on the pike for a few months, I do, however, have a pretty clear understanding that this is a generational, once in a generation opportunity to envision pretty audacious community planning and investment. And the conversations that I've had with people over the last couple months have reflected a lot of the things that we've heard about retaining some of the character of the small businesses, but also thinking about things that don't exist on the pike, but could exist on the pike, whether it's creative green spaces that are larger than existing green spaces now. A way to reincorporate 4 Mile Run into the community. How do we find additional community convening spaces that may have been envisioned at Penrose or at Arlington Mill, but may not really have been fully realized, whether that's outdoor space, Lubber Run-esque, or indoor space for performing arts or music or meetings or community spaces. Because there are very few places in Arlington, if not the country, where you have this much land with this much of a tabula rasa, if you will, to think expansively, creatively, and with so many stakeholders who have vested interest in supporting it and having the investment of the county and the community. So I'm not an urban planner, but I do believe that there are a lot of smart people that can be engaged in this to think as audaciously, creatively, and generationally as possible. And I would encourage all of us to be a part of putting that audacious hat on as much as we can.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. Commissioner Slatt, your hand is still up. I think that is not, I suspect that you've merely left it up.
If he goes again, I want to go again, Daniel.
Well, I'm gonna recognize myself first anyway, which is to say I think, and I'm speaking. I want to emphasize that I'm really only speaking for myself when I say this, because others, I think there are different people of different minds in this. I personally do not know that I think of the public space at Kentro as a success. I think that there are people who do. I don't see it as one. I think that in comparison to the other one in Penrose, that's a public space that's highly active and activated that we just don't see it at Kentro. There are other criteria for the success of a public space than how activated it is and how much people are using it. So I have a bias towards that one. But having said bias towards that one, I think that we have an opportunity here with the catty corner part of the intersection to do other things that are public spaces that are more inviting to a town square. That's something that I'm speaking for myself only, but we have an opportunity to really build out a fantastic intersection there, unlike what else exists on the Pike, because two corners of it are being are under the same owner. Mr. Matuzik, I'm going to go to you not just for that, but to respond to any of the the last few comments and other staff as well.
I partially raised my hand because there is a fifth question, if time permits, since we seem to be doing really well on schedule. When we get to it, I'll be ready to put it up.
Great.
But I think you highlight a great example of opportunities that exist, but that we have to be very strategic in designing, because some really good designs have impractical maintenance plans. And I think one of the problems with what's happened across the street, and granted we've had a change in ownership, I think the new team that's there has gotten some feedback from the county, and will hopefully revitalize that corner plaza. But I think as great as the process was and the design initially implemented on that plaza at George Mason, we've learned that maintenance is a critical element in really realizing it, particularly when you're dealing with elements that are installed that require several years to really mature and realize in master renderings that we were all really happy with. And that's something that we really need to just scale up for a 60-acre property, where similar landscape plans need to really keep in mind that, part of the financing that we just started the meeting with needs to consider the commitment we're making when we consider all these improvements. It likely won't be a one-time payment. So if it is going to be an ongoing investment, how do we consider that in some of the choices we're making and recommendations we're putting forward? So I think having nearby examples of how things can go is really, I think, a refreshing, element to consider because it just happened across the street. And hopefully that informs the conversations.
Well, that's such an incredibly important point that you make. That we're not thinking. We're thinking in and this is an exercise in thinking in decades, right? Like we're not talking about what this is going to look like in 2025. We're not talking about what this is going to look like in 2030. We're not actually talking about, in some philosophical level about what this is ever going to look like, because plans change over time, and because and because plans change over time, and because this isn't all going to be built at once at the same time, right? So like there isn't going to be a point at which all of this is new in the way that all of the plans look new and shiny. By the time the last pieces are falling into place, the first pieces that get built are going to be decades old. So it is important to be mindful that, even when we look at a rendering, that it's not a rendering of something that's going to actually exist at any point in time. It's a conceptual rendering, and we have to be thinking about, how is this going to look like when it's initially delivered, and how is it going to, and how long is it going to take to get there? Yeah, really good points, Mr. Matusik. Thank you. I think that unless Commissioner Slatt wants to be recognized again, Mr. Matusik, I'm going to go back to you to raise the fifth question.
Yeah, and I think above and beyond anything else people want to raise, since we're here, I think what would be really interesting and helpful, given that I'm going to just assume many of the folks that are on this call are well-traveled, and likely have studied other examples that we might be undertaking here. It would be really helpful, at least for staff, and I imagine Jair Lynch as well, who are on the call, to hear from any kind of suggestions of regional, national, maybe even international examples where some aspects of what you think we might be considering over the coming weeks and months have really been successful somewhere else. Is there a site of this scale that perhaps had a fraction of the challenges that we need to deal with? What did they do well that, I guess, either made it memorable, maybe, allowed it to win an award or became a destination, something that you associate with that city or, state or country. So anything, either tonight or moving forward that you can think of could really help us, I think, draw some interesting comparisons, lessons learned, and really solutions, because I have to imagine there's examples of some form of this out there that we can probably pull from and not have to recreate the entire wheel.
Do you have a slide with that on it by any chance?
It was just written out. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. And there is a follow-up question in terms of what does success look like, and I think that's really important here, because I think what we want to really consider is, as we go through these topics, and given all the restrictions that are in front of us, what do you consider a success story when we're all done? Is it the balancing act? Is it establishing something unique on Barcroft? Is it the affordability? We're going to, keep coming back to that. And we're strategically asking these questions because they really will inform the way in which we address upcoming topics and some of the exercises that we might, establish for some of the upcoming meetings. So things like that, I was just trying to start the conversation and get folks to share what their perspectives might be.
Well, there aren't any. Thank you, Mr. Matusik. There aren't any. Okay, I'll recognize myself later. We'll start with Ms. McWilliams. Thank you.
Thank you. This is such a unique opportunity. And I think from our perspective, what what has been a closed off community to its community has a real opportunity to welcome people from the broader community in. And I have loved so many of the things that folks have talked about tonight. And I would ask all of us to think about how we welcome Barcroft back into the Columbia Pike community, because I think it's been separated for so many decades. And whether that's through shared community space where different stakeholders can bring things into Barcroft and have that Barcroft community engage within the larger community. It doesn't need to be so separated. And I would just challenge everybody to think about, what does that mean? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McWilliams. I will take the opportunity. This isn't to undermine or negate anything that you've just added to the conversation, but I'll take the opportunity to remind people that we ask that there be one speaker at the table, so to speak, from each organization. The chair's prerogative and the fact that we still have 20 minutes left on the advertised meeting, I think there's no good reason to not recognize people, given who's on the meeting and where we're at. So I have exercised that discretion in this case. But remember to please, just a reminder to please speak through the spokesperson. But well said. There are two. I'll recognize myself. There are two conditions that I don't know that they're by themselves sufficient. But for me, I think they're both necessary. And as to the question of what success looks like, one of the necessary but probably not sufficient measures of success or indicia of success is robust participation by some representative of the residents, and so the work is on us. Is both on us as broadly as the working group, but also on Eric and myself and staff to make sure that that's reflected. And another indicia of success that I think is necessary but not by itself sufficient is that there be some reasonable an entitlement for some reasonable expansion of the total number of housing units that are on the overall site. I don't know what that number is. The number that I've always sort of said to myself and others that, this will be a disaster if it's not whatever is at least as many market rate units on the site as preserved committed affordable units. So if we've got 1,300 committed, if we've got 1,300 units on the site now, that there be a path to that there be entitled or a path to the entitlement of net new 1,300 market rate units on top of the 1,300 preserved units. I'm not wedded to that number. That's just a made up number that I have used when I start yelling at clouds in the presence of friends and loved ones. But we do have to have a goal, I think, of a path to not being satisfied if what comes out of this is just preserving the units, and I think that we're on that path. I mean, it's really hard to look at the financing and development plan and not not see that. But that doesn't mean that it's not what I see as one of the metrics of success. Ms. McWilliams, your hand is still up. I'll come back to you if you're seeking a recognition again. I'm going to go to Commissioner Howell, and then to Commissioner Lawrence, and then to staff, and then I will continue going down the list.
Thank you very much. On the first of these, Matt, could you just go back to the previous so we can look at those topics? And I'm very much in favor of number 4, because even though the first 3 are very important, to me they're kind of like what we already think we know, or what we already think is important. And the 4th one, asks for that creativeness, the audaciousness, the imagineering of about what could happen and what this could be. And I think that's where the potential is before we get to, when we're already at a point of having something that's good and getting to spectacular. Recognizing, of course, the financial climate and all the other issues that are involved, but that's what creativity is about. Finding that path, finding those possibilities, and making them work. So that's I think the one that triggers your energy when you think about this whole process. Now, if you could just go back, Matt, to the next slide again. I just wanted to comment on the second one. Yes, there are examples. I think at least a couple in New York, and I will look for some. But I just wanted to use this as a way to emphasize one of the points that I made earlier, which is that your open space, your negative space, your unbuilt space, it's not only important, but it has to be part of the equation at the beginning. I know some things here are already fixed, or some things are partially fixed, but if you start by plunking things down and then saying whatever's left over, we're going to try to do something with it, that's not as good as having, especially with the topography here, that's not as good as saying what spaces can do what and connect with each other, make for creative circulation, provide respite and calm and quiet places, as well as energetic and active places, and have social places. Thinking about that space as something that matters as much as the structures themselves when it comes to the overall layout of the site. 2 firms I just want to mention, I'm not getting paid for this, but we know because they were involved in a couple of our biggest projects by Amazon. One is Jones Corner Operations, which did the Met Park landscaping, and the other one is Scape, a firm called Scape, which did Penn Place. Both of them have national reputations going around doing something spectacular with big sites. And so I'm only mentioning that if you want to look for some examples, just Google them. And as far as success, I think everyone's enthusiastic about the potential and the possibilities. And when the approval is done, I hope that's the case. And I think success is when 10 years later, you still feel the same way.
Thank you, Commissioner Howell. I'm mindful of the time. I see Lawrence, Mariquin, and Berkey. I'm going to get to at least the 3 of you. I also want us to make sure that we've got that staff has at least a few minutes before 9 o'clock to talk through, to just give a reminder on what's next in the rest of the process. So, Mr. Matuzik, if you have 8:55 and on, do you think that would be sufficient for you? Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lawrence.
Thank you. As we were going through these questions, and I was thinking about Barcroft as it is now, which is a community, a really unique community of people. And I hope that in this process, we don't lose sight of the people who can afford to live in Barcroft right now because of what it is and where they can live, and they have a place to park their trucks, and they have, because if you've ever gone down George Mason Drive at any particular hour of the day or night, there are all kinds of trucks parked there. And these are people who are really important to Arlington and to keeping Arlington going from many, many perspectives. And so I really do hope that we have able to have more representation from them and consider them, because I think success to the people that we're looking at for this project is going to look quite different than it will to some of us on this working group. Yes, we're trying to provide a place where people can afford to live and continue to be able to afford to live there. A place that preserves some of the historical features of the place, maybe provide some more housing, and a quality of life, and the kinds of spaces that Mr. Howell was talking about. But I think that we can't lose sight of what Barcroft is right now and what it has been and what it's provided both for the group of people who live there and for Arlington as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lawrence, and well said. Mr. Merriquin.
I just want to build off actually what Joan just said, and it's the third question there about what success looks like. I think for me, it's both building and maintaining sort of community trust, particularly with folks that aren't as easily able to attend these meetings, and whether it be because of a language barrier or because they work in the evenings, or maybe they're also not as able to participate in the Barcroft tenant advisory opportunities. And so, and that really happens over the long run. I think it means that years from now, when people start to see these changes taking place, many of which are very positive and much needed, updating infrastructure, protecting green space, improving the apartments themselves that Jair Lynch has been very detailed about, and saying, something as meaningful as an in-unit washer and dryer that can really change things for a family. You don't have to walk out of your unit to go wash your clothes. You can stay there with your child. These things, I think, often people can be skeptical that they come sort of at a cost. They come at a like, what's the catch? Is my rent going to skyrocket? Are we going to be pushed out of the community? And I think a lot of what has been said so far, and I think the commitments that Jair Lynch has made are unique and really important to rent stabilization. But there can be other hidden costs along the way, not so much from the property management or the property itself, but just in cost of living in Arlington, and just what it means for people to actually still be able to stay in the community, even if their specific apartment is rent stabilized. And so just kind of keeping people involved, both building off the commitment that the county has made and Jair Lynch has made to the 10% of units being deeply affordable. So going beyond the usual affordability definition of 60%, but committing to 30% of AMI, and then looking for opportunities to actually expand upon that, because to Joan's point earlier, the community that lives there now often have made ends meet in order to stay in one of the last few market rate affordable communities in Arlington. And again, all these changes are much needed and welcome. But we don't want that to sort of mean that people sort of self-select out and don't see themselves reflected in these changes, and whether or not their apartment is rent stabilized, they actually still leave, are displaced from Arlington. So maintaining communication, maintaining that trust, and I think, our group, I think, has a role in that as well, when we're outside of these meetings, to really factor in that input from a broader cross-section of Arlington. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Merriquin. Commissioner Berkey, I'm going to go to you in a moment. I want to take the opportunity just to remind Mr. Miltenberger and Ms. Levine, I believe, I'm sorry if I've not written that down correctly, that you can certainly *6 yourself to speak up Mr. Miltenberger, if I'll come to you in a moment, but I'm going to go to Commissioner Berkey next.
Thanks, Daniel. Try to make this brief. So many great comments from folks tonight. Brian, well said. Joan, many others. I think a lot of folks know this, but it is, it's worth remembering how big a deal this deal is. I was trying to just in recent memory think about kind of some of the bigger affordable housing deals. Melissa's been involved in a bunch of them, and her colleagues. Crystal Houses comes to mind. That's still very much in progress. That's 655 units of affordable housing. That's a monster project. Many millions of dollars. Land, very complicated project. We've had a lot of projects in Arlington with 140, 150. There's Central United Methodist in Ballston. Infamously took years. Many tax credits, many efforts, and they're finally finishing construction. I think the point I'm trying to make is this is such a massive deal as far as preserving these units. It has got to be one of the biggest deals, not only in the state, but maybe the United States, as far as preserving existing affordable housing and doing so for such a long term, 99 years. And so I think for me, this is a baseline, and maybe it's assumed, but making sure that this project remains as feasible, for the community as well as Gyre Lynch as possible. That's the only way this makes any sense, is that we can continue to make sure that Gyre Lynch and the county, uphold this commitment. And so, of course, a big part of that is going to be redevelopment, but renovation as well. And so even for a lot of the folks who are not necessarily going to be living in newly redeveloped properties, they're already getting a lot of time and attention, money. Gyre Lynch has already put a lot of money, into renovations. And so, to me, the most important goal of this whole process is to make sure that this remains viable, that Gyre Lynch remains, as a partner, and that ultimately, we do have these committed affordable units, for 99 years, and we remain on this viable trajectory. And then everything else we'll ask for as much as we can from a community benefit standpoint. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Berkey. I'm going to go to Mr. Miltenberger and then Mr. Matuszek. I know it's 8:55 now, but hopefully people will indulge us the few extra minutes. Mr. Miltenberger, if you wanted to be recognized, I see you're off mute. And you're back on mute. Okay, Mr. Matuszek, to you.
Sure. The slide we want to just bring back up is, again, a reminder for reconvening in a couple of weeks. We wanted to emphasize the project website, so more information about what we're doing, why we're doing it. Tonight's presentation will be posted there. We're also going to include a calendar with additional meeting invites. All the key information for contact is there, whether you want to reach out to any one of us. We actually prefer that you copy all three, which streamlines some of the communications. And if one of us is out for whatever reason, the other two can pick up and be responsive. And again, as we mentioned earlier, the focus will be one of the first topics that we discussed earlier, which is the balancing act between preservation and new development, and what does that mean for kind of the two key frontages of Columbia Pike and Flormont Run.
Thank you, Mr. Matuszek. Ms. Sonntag, you've got your light on, or your camera on, and Ms. Danowski, I want to just make sure that you both have an opportunity to chime in if there's anything you wanted to add.
Oh, Matt captured it, and we're looking forward to this process.
As am I, and as is Commissioner Berkey. Thank you all very much for your comments. I know that some of my colleagues on the Planning Commission like to do a meeting wrap up. There's no way I'm even going to try with that tonight, because there's just the volume of great comments, and the fact that the meeting's recorded. And I know that I will at least listen to it probably not on 1X, but I will at least try to listen to all of it again before we next meet. So thank you all for your thoughtful and many comments. I am confident that this is going to be a successful project, and I know that opinion is shared across, or that hope is shared across the board. Thank you to all of the staff who are on. Thank you to the representatives of Gyre Lynch and team who are here with us tonight. And thank you to everyone who is participating. Unless there is anything else for the good of the order, I'll give it a beat. I am going to declare that this meeting is adjourned, and that I look forward to speaking with you all in a few weeks. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.